All right, so today we are diving into the world of Irish music sessions. And you know those unspoken rules and etiquette that everyone's always talking about? Well, you guys sent in a bunch of messages from a forum, and one particular tune sparked a pretty intense debate. The Glasgow Reel. Have you heard of this
Oh,
controversy?
absolutely. It's a classic case study, really. It touches on tradition, taste, and the whole dynamic of fitting into a session.
So, for those who might not be familiar with the session scene,
Maybe they're just dipping their toes into the world of Irish music.
what exactly are we talking about when we say session?
Well, imagine walking into a pub,
Yeah.
cozy atmosphere, maybe a fireplace crackling in the corner, and there's this group of musicians just casually playing tunes together. That's a session.
And it's all about everyone joining in.
Exactly. It's about sharing the music, having a bit of crake. But that's where the whole etiquette thing comes in, right?
Because you don't want to be that person.
The one who clears the room with their instrument.
Right, especially if it's the Glasgow reel. Our friend Snowflake on the forum, they seem pretty torn about it.
Oh, yeah.
They call it godforsaken, but admit to kind of enjoying it too. You can just feel their anxiety about playing it in a session.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Like, will they be accepted or shunned for their musical choices?
It's a universal feeling, though, isn't it?
You mean that fear of judgment?
Absolutely.
Mm.
Every genre has its share of standards,
Hmm.
tunes that everyone knows, and maybe some have heard one too many times.
Like Stairway to Heaven at a guitar shop.
Oh, God, yeah, exactly. Or Freebird at a karaoke bar. You never know if people are going to love it or roll their eyes.
And it seems like the Glasgow reel falls into that category for some folks. So what is it about this particular tune? Is it really that godforsaken?
Well, it's also known as Tam Lin, and it's actually quite catchy
Hmm.
and relatively easy to pick up, especially on the banjo.
Ah, so maybe that's part of the problem. It gets overplayed.
Could be. You know how it is. That song you hear on repeat and suddenly you're like, okay, enough.
It's like musical overexposure.
Totally. And I think some of the forum responses really captured that
Yeah,
sentiment.
yeah. Like what were people saying about poor the Glasgow reel?
Well, one person, Janie, said they'd be happy not to hear it again for a decade.
A decade, that's a long time.
Right. But then there's Ethical Blend, who actually admitted to leaving the pub whenever it comes on.
Wow, okay. Maybe a little extreme.
Uh-huh. Maybe so. But it shows just how strongly people feel about these things.
Yeah, it's true. Music can be such a personal experience.
And in a session setting,
Hmm.
it becomes this shared experience. And that could be amazing. But it can also lead to some interesting dynamics, let's just say.
It's like you're not just playing notes anymore. You're navigating this whole web of tradition and personal preferences.
Yeah. And trying to decipher the unspoken rules.
Which, as we're finding out, can be a bit of a minefield. So it's not just about the tunes themselves, it's about understanding the vibe of the session, right?
Yeah, you got to read the room.
Mm.
Like some of the other commenters were saying, like Mark M., for example, said that good players are usually pretty welcoming.
Especially to newcomers.
Exactly. It's about fostering that sense of community,
Yeah,
which is really what makes a session special, you know?
definitely. But of course, there's always that flip side to it.
Oh, yeah.
Peace brought up an interesting point. They said it's often the not so hot players who are the harshest critics.
Oh, that's so true. It's like they feel the need to prove something, maybe overcompensating for their own insecurities.
Could be a bit of gatekeeping going on.
A little bit, yeah. Instead of it being about the shared love of the music, it becomes this weird sort of competition.
Which is a shame because it can discourage people from joining in.
Absolutely. And that defeats the whole purpose of a session.
And that whole dynamic of gatekeeping versus welcoming newcomers, it makes you wonder about those gatekeepers. Were they once beginners themselves, feeling unsure and a bit lost?
Totally. We've all been there, right?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out the unwritten rules, hoping we don't mess up.
Speaking of unwritten rules and maybe messing up,
Uh-oh. What'd you do?
you mentioned Stairway to Heaven earlier. Imagine playing that at a session. Talk about clearing the room.
Oh, my God, yeah. Some tunes are just sacred, you know?
Or maybe just cursed, depending on who you ask.
Exactly. It all comes down to context and reading the room.
And maybe knowing your audience a little bit.
Definitely. And, you know, you brought up an interesting point earlier about the Glasgow reel being so popular, maybe even overplayed. It made me think about how tunes can go through these phases, you know?
Like fashion trends.
Exactly. What's old becomes new again. A tune might be all the rage one year, then fade into obscurity, only to be rediscovered and embraced again years later.
Like that old vinyl you find in your attic. Suddenly it's a collector's item.
Right. Or that vintage band t-shirt you dug out of the back of your closet.
Mm.
It's all about the cycle of trends and tastes.
So maybe the Glasgow reel just needs a little break.
A decade or two in hibernation, and then it'll be back with a vengeance.
Maybe. Though I doubt our friend Snowflake wants to wait that long to play it.
True enough. So
Yeah.
what's the verdict? What advice did the forum have for our anxious friend?
Well, it seemed like the general consensus was when in doubt, observe.
Listen to what others are playing.
Get a feel for the overall vibe of the session.
It's like that moment before a band practice, right? You're all just warming up, tuning your instruments, feeling out the energy.
Yeah, you get a sense of who's up for experimenting and who's sticking to the set list.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance between individual expression.
And the collective experience.
And that's what makes sessions so unique. It's a two-way street, isn't it?
It really is all about finding that balance. So for anyone listening who might be in Snowflake's shoes, feeling a little unsure about bringing their own tunes to a session,
A little nervous.
yeah, what advice would you give them?
Well, first and foremost, find sessions where you feel comfortable.
Not just musically, but like socially too.
Exactly. You want to be somewhere you feel welcome, where you can ask questions.
Even those slightly embarrassing ones like, is it cool if I play this?
Aha, exactly. Because chances are, most musicians at a session, they're happy to share the music.
You're not there to like intimidate anyone.
Not at all. It's about the joy of playing together.
And who knows, maybe that tune you think is overplayed could spark a whole new arrangement or inspire someone to learn something new.
Absolutely. That's the beauty of these gatherings.
It's like this living, breathing tradition
Constantly evolve.
shaped by everyone who participates.
It's like finding a hidden gem in your record collection and
Yeah.
getting to share it with someone who gets it.
And that's really what this whole Glasgow reel debate comes down to. It's not just about the tune itself. It's about finding your place in that musical community, navigating those unwritten rules.
And maybe even bending them a little.
Exactly. Respecting the tradition, but also bringing your own unique voice to the table.
Because that's how traditions stay alive, right?
Absolutely. They have to grow and change with the times. And that brings me to a question for you, dear listener. Is there a tune you love? One that makes your heart sing,
The one you blast in the car when no one's watching.
but that others might find a bit, well, tiresome?
Overplayed.
Maybe.
Mm.
And how can we, as music lovers, approach those differences in taste with empathy and curiosity?
And maybe even a little bit of humor.
That's something to ponder over your next pint at a session. This has been a fascinating dive into the world of Irish music sessions, the traditions, the tunes.
And the etiquette minefield.
Exactly. We hope you've learned a thing or two.
And maybe even feel inspired to seek out a session near you.
Just remember to bring your instrument, your enthusiasm, and most importantly, your willingness to listen and learn.
Because at the end of the day, isn't that what music's all about?
Cheers to that.